Aloha everybody and welcome back to another episode of So Well Garage. I'm Cameron Sowell, and in today's episode of Let's Build a Turbo Taco, we finally get to see what is inside of our 2JZ, and I'm going to explain what exactly is going on with this build. Alright, so let's go ahead and see what's under the head of our 2JZ. So I'm not even going to try and lie, but I did unfortunately order the wrong part. You can see here that this is way too short to be able to make it to the head studs. So I went ahead and reordered another kit on Amazon, cost me about $18, and you can see that this is going to be more than enough for our head bolts. So now it's time to actually de-torque the head bolts, but we don't actually want to fully remove them just yet, because if we end up removing them fully each one by one, we're going to either warp or crack the head, and clearly we do not want that. Now that we have systematically de-torqued all of our head bolts, it's time to fully remove them. So clearly we have some carbon buildup, but in all actuality it's not that bad for a 20-year-old engine, and you can see that the pistons move freely in the cylinders. So I will not be reusing these pistons, so I'm going to clean them up and label them. In order to clean them, I am not going to use soap or water. That will cause rusting in the cylinder walls, so I'm going to use PB Blaster, which is petroleum or oil based, so that won't cause rusting, as well as once again utilizing 600 grit wet sandpaper. So you can see that I am only sanding the pistons that are top dead center. You do not want to put sandpaper in your cylinders. I didn't even want to risk the chance of marking or marring my cylinders. So now it's time to break free our connecting rod caps. So pro tip when it comes to actually removing these connecting rod caps, if you don't pull the bolts all the way out, just remove them from the threads and then push them together and pull, the connecting cap will just come right off. With our connecting rod cap now removed, now it's time to actually remove the piston. What I did was I placed a bolt back into the connecting rod and then lightly tapped it with a mallet. that's it. With all 6 pistons removed, now we have a bare block to start our build with. Alright guys, now that we actually have this 2J fully disassembled and we can see that we're starting off with a really good block, it's time to explain what this build is about and why we're building it the way that we're building it, not to mention the actual building process that we are going to be doing on this 2J. Now, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there, including my mother, asking, Cameron, why do you need a 400 horsepower truck? Well, don't worry guys, including my mom, this isn't my first 400 plus horsepower build slash truck. Shout out to Big Blue again. But the whole purpose and point behind this build is so that I can actually build a drift truck, right? I don't know how to drift. Never even tried it, but it's something that I've always really been interested in, and I figured, why not build a drift truck, especially when I got such a great deal on a 2JZ. Alright, so I'm sure if you're watching this series, you already know the plan, right? We're putting a 2JZ into a Toyota Tacoma, right? A 2,700 pound single cab short bed truck with a 400-ish horsepower build 2JZ, right? Little to no weight, big engine, big power, boom. Seems pretty simple, right? Drift truck. But how are we actually building this engine, right? So to get things started off, right, we're going to talk a little bit about 2Js, right? Everybody thinks that 2J is 2J. That's not necessarily the truth, right? There's several different variants between the VVTIs, the non-VVTIs, the GEs, the GTEs, right? So when somebody tells you, oh, I have a Supra engine, people automatically think GTE. Right, so this is not a Supra engine, right? Even though the GEs were available in the Supras, we won't get into that too much. But the main difference between the GE blocks and the GTE blocks is absolutely nothing. All right, the only thing that the GTE block has over the GE block is the oil squirters. So now it's time to move on to similarities between the GTE and the GE, right? So the GTE and the GE both come from the factory with forged internals, unless you're talking about the VVTI models, which this is a VVTI model and I do plan to keep it that way, right? So the GE VVTI does not have forged connecting rods or pistons as where the GTE does, because it's turboed from the factory, so it would be extremely pointless to do a forced induction engine without forged internals. But anyways, the bore is exactly the same, the cranks are exactly the same, right? So we have a really good building block for a boosted build since we already have a forged crank, right? Essentially what I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to get a set of used GTE pistons and connecting rods, use the bearings from my GE motor, and use them on the GTE connecting rods and pistons. So with all that being said, right, I'll have a forged piston, a forged connecting rod, and a forged crank, all of which is going to be absolutely perfect for a boosted build, right? I am not trying to break horsepower records. I'm not trying to go stupid fast. I just want enough power to be fun and be able to drift easily, right? This is going to allow me to do that. So now that we've talked about the internals of the engine, right, it's time to get on to the turbo manifold, all the other stuff that we're going to be building around the engine, right? I am definitely a budget-friendly builder. I am not trying to build this cheaply and unreliably, but I'm also not trying to break the bank with $1,500 forged connecting rods, pistons, turbo, blah, 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 right? I don't want to end up dropping 10, 15 grand at the end of the day just for the novelty sake of putting a 2JZ into a 1999 Toyota Tacoma. That to me doesn't seem like fun at all. So with that being said, right, I'm probably just gonna end up going with a universal eBay turbo kit. I know there's so many people out there that are so anti that, but with that being said, there's been a lot of development. There's been a lot of good reviews coming out from these cheaper eBay turbo kits, right? So I feel comfortable utilizing a cheap turbo and a cheap turbo manifold. I don't see the sense in spending $800 on a turbo manifold because it looks pretty, as where I can spend $120 on a eBay or Amazon turbo manifold. To me, it just doesn't make sense. All right, so we've talked about everything that's going to make power with this engine, right? So now it's time to talk about how we're gonna get that to the ground, right? So I've decided to go with a CD009 swap. There's been a whole bunch of other people doing that. I've seen so many videos, so many forums, so many swaps when it comes to that. I feel comfortable doing it. Not to mention the price point is so much better for a CD009 as opposed to an R154 or any of these other Toyota transmissions that are coming really hard to find. And if you do find them, they're stupid expensive. I have absolutely no issue with using a Nissan transmission in my Toyota truck. Not to mention there's so much support out there for these swaps, so you can easily get adapter kits to fit this CD009 transmission up to your 2J. I just think it's the better option and the more budget-friendly option for this build. All right, so we have talked about the engine, we've talked about the turbo, we've talked about the transmission. All right, logically the next step is going to be our drive shaft and our rear end, right? It's all useless if we can't actually get that power to the ground, right? So what I've decided to do is I'm gonna go with a Ford 8.8 rear end and just get a custom drive shaft made at a local driveline shop. Now the reason behind the Ford 8.8 is because it literally fits exactly like the Toyota stock rear end does. They're extremely available, they're super cheap, and they're really strong. And this is going to be really good for me to be able to actually put the amount of power that I'm going to be making to the actual ground. So now that we've talked about everything when it comes to power delivery, how we're going to make this power, how we're going to get it to the ground, let's talk about the appearances of this truck and what I plan on doing with this truck. Honestly, that portion is not going to be all that crazy. I already showed you guys the wrap, the color that I'm going to go with. The whole truck is going to be wrapped in that color. I love that color. I do actually plan on doing a custom front bumper, probably out of fiberglass, since it's cheap and readily available. There's basically these dividers in the front bumper. So what I want to do is just kind of smooth out the edges and then clear all those dividers out and smooth that and round it out, so that way we can get better airflow to our intercooler, so we can get cooler air and make our engine a little bit more happy. I'm also planning on running a different rim and tire setup. Not really sure on that. Not exactly too picky, but I also don't want to spend a stupid amount of money on rims and tires. Not to mention, if I'm going to be drifting this truck, there's no sense in dropping that money because I'm probably just going to end up getting curb rash and all kinds of other stuff on them. So I'll probably just go with some Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace rims on the cheap and go from there. All right, guys, if you have made it to this portion of the video, I just want to thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting me and this build. If you have any critiques, if you think that the way that I'm building this is not right, or there's certain things that you would advise, or even if there's we'll say a cheap eBay turbo kit that you recommend, let me know in the comments below so that way I can check it out. I'll absolutely 100% listen to you guys and the things that you have to say. It doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to do them, but I want to know what you guys think. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. And remember, the only place to get things done so well is the So Well Garage. Thanks, guys. Peace.